So for anyone that is watching, I'd like to introduce you. So this is Alethea Avramis. I am Giannis Kandea-Papαδopoulos. I'm a film critic for Athinorama magazine, athinorama.gr as well. So the reason for doing this interview is because your movie, Alethea, called Sundays, your feature documentary debut, is screening as part of the Thessaloniki International Film Festival, which under the circumstances is happening virtually. And that is also why we are having this interview via Zoom and not in person. So I'd just like to say a few words about what your movie is about, and then we can start having our little discussion on it. So your movie is about your father, who was a Greek Orthodox priest for approximately 30 years, and something happened, and I want to reveal what. And he decided to leave his the priesthood. And around the same time, you found some footage that he had been recording for a while of him having some confessions to himself while he was shooting some material around his life and his work, basically. And then you decided to make this movie about your relationship with him, his relationship with the priesthood and his family, and most of all, about the relationship that he had with himself and the crisis of identity that he faced. So I guess that's it. That's the movie, and I hope I didn't give away too much, because I watched your movie this morning, and I have to say that it was obviously very touching, and I admire the fact that he himself and you as a filmmaker didn't you weren't afraid to face like your personal life in such a way, and you had the courage to document it without any filters, and to be exposed really in such a degree. So my first question to you, Alethea, is I mean, you obviously had an amazing footage in your hands, and you know what kind of a man your father was, but it had to be very courageous of you to decide that to make this into a feature film.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. That was a really good summary of the film, I think, that you did. It's funny, a few people during the process of the making of the film said, "Oh wow, this is so brave of you to do," or this is very courageous of you. And at the time, it didn't really feel that way to me. I felt like it was something that I had to do. It felt something that was necessary for me as a daughter, I think, as someone who's trying to understand their own parent. It just so happened that my parent happened to be a priest.
Yes.
So it's an emanation of a family in some ways. And I think that at all points in our lives, there is a moment where we start to separate from our parents, and we understand them as a person, as an individual, not necessarily as our mother or as our father. And so for me, I just felt like this was that moment, and I happened to have a camera with me, and I felt like it would be something, it could be something powerful that could connect to other people's lives. Through his documentary, through my father's film that he had made. I had always felt that was very, very powerful. And I think if anybody was courageous too, it was my father and also my mother, who decided to, they allowed me to film them in this way, and to speak to them so openly. And it wasn't easy for them either, and it was definitely challenging during some moments for both of us, especially during some particular interviews. But that's kind of how I navigated everything. Is I just felt that it was a necessary moment in my life to explore the background of my father, and to get to know him as a person, as an individual, and separate from his role as my father.
What was very interesting was how everyone in your family and especially your father was not obstructed by the presence of the camera. He was very at ease with it. There are quite a few moments in the movie, and I'm not even referring at his own material, but what you've been shooting with him, that it's as though the camera presence is not there, and there are moments so emotional that I kept thinking, how can no one says please stop shooting? I mean, that was amazing for me. I mean, how it was like so normal to have the camera there.
Yeah, I think there are a few scenes that are pretty raw emotionally, and that might be what you're referring to, that I was filming those scenes.
Yeah.
I did work with a few DPs on DOPs on the film, but in a lot of the more emotional scenes, it was just me filming them. And he had said to me, I will do this just with you, so I wanted to honor that, of course. And it meant that it was just me behind it, kind of doing everything, and also trying to ask my questions and be involved in everything. But yes, he was, I think that he was very used to, as you see in the film, being in front of people and speaking in front of people. And I think that the camera for him was an extension of that. I don't think that he, maybe maybe a normal interview subject who's not so used to speaking in that way, he was very used to opening up in front of people, maybe not in the way, of course, that he did in his own film, but he still is very comfortable with public speaking and being at ease in that way. And so I felt that he was like that with me too. And as I think you can see in the film, he and I have a very special and open relationship. And so there was never a time during the filming of it where I felt like he didn't want me to be there, or he was not going to answer something that I was asking. It was a pretty open process.
And it was also quite a revelation for me, being born and bred Greek, that we mostly hear stories about how Greek Orthodox and Greek people now in the States live. We don't actually have a tangible experience of your life there. So my question has two parts. The first part is maybe personal for you, how it was to be born and raised in such a fashion. And the second part is, well, it's obvious that your father had a special kind of character. So he was not in that way a typical priest, but how is it to be in touch with other people from the priesthood, and which are the differences that your father had comparing to the others?
Those are really good questions. Yeah, I mean, I watched the film the other day, actually, in Los Angeles, where I am with some friends of mine in who are from Greece. And the experience of growing up as a Greek American is very different, and I think people's relationships with the church is very different. If you were Greek American, it very much mirrors, let's say, a typical American experience. The churches are the cultural institutions for things. So it's where you go to Greek school, and it's where you learn how to Greek dance, and you go to camp, and it's a very kind of American experience. Whereas in Greece, and it's obviously the church is a kind of different institution and plays a bit of a different role, I think, in people's everyday lives. And so growing up as Greek American in the States, it was, you really have a strong part of your identity as that, at least the way that I was raised. And of course, with my father being a priest, and the role of the priest is very different, I think, in the US. There, as my father says in his own film, there are so many things that people are sharing with him, that he's really in people's personal lives. He's helping them through very, very dark times. He's celebrating with them in their happy moments. And I thought that that was something very interesting too, as a filmmaker, that, wow, this is a role that you're really with people at their highest moments and at their lowest moments. And what does that do to somebody psychologically over time to be that person? And so it's interesting. My respect for people who decide to become priests since I made the film has increased so much. You know, I'm talking about specifically in the United States. Just, it's, you know, it's not easy, of course. And you know, there's another interview in the film of a priest is a very good friend of my father's, and he says, you know, I had to go no matter when somebody would call. This was, whenever they called, I had to go, and sometimes it hurt my own family, but still I had to, you know, had to do it. I mean, in that sense, they are doctors. They are spiritual doctors, and if they get a phone call, then, you know, they have to go. And anyway, I think that is kind of a unique experience that also is unique, I think, to being in the church outside of Greece too, in some ways. And then you asked the second question about my father's.
Yes, what were the differences of your father as a priest comparing to others? Because you interview some of them that knew your father, and they don't seem to us as viewers, they don't seem that different, but there are some comments that they made that that they also declared to themselves, to the camera, that, you know, he was quite a different person in a good sense. I mean, that's what I want to find out. I mean, how was he as a priest compared to the others?
Well, he was really known, and this isn't as explored as much in the film, but he is really known for his sense of humor. My dad was, and still is, a very funny person, and he really makes people feel extremely comfortable. Yes. And he's extremely relatable, and you don't really think that you're so separate from this person and that they somehow maybe have a, you know, direct line to God. That he was really in with people's lives and invested in that. And I think that he had a hard time relating maybe to other priests. Of course, he was friends with many people and they had that connection, but I think that because he was a little more irreverent than maybe other priests were, and he worked with people in a different way. And so I think that because people found him so relatable, and because he took on all of that too, it obviously ended up becoming something that was too much to bear at one point.
There are two quotes that I want to make from your father, but the first one is relatable to what you said about him being kind of tired and not having a direct line with God. He says at some point a fantastic quote, I hate being the spokesman of God, which is something that normal people outside the priesthood would never imagine, that they're people too, and they struggle, obviously. But this line strike me the most. Did he? It's obvious that he didn't speak about a lot of things happening in his life, but did he even give you maybe a hint or maybe a sense of doubt that there were some times that he struggled himself with his faith, or maybe he was just tired of having to give so much hope and help to other people? I mean, in a human way, obviously. I mean,
yeah. I've thought about that so many times when I was in the process of making the film, of like kind of going back through my childhood and analyzing if there were moments or things that I maybe would have seen or picked up on. And I think that there were, but the thing is, as you see in the film, he still kept it so much inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was important to him to be strong as a, you know, as a man, as a Greek, as a priest, all of those things, which are very strong feelings of identity and of a role that you play. And I know that he wanted to really keep so much together for his family and for the people that he served. So I did see probably some things where he, you know, he really just needed, like we all need, we need a break sometimes, or we need some kind of respite from something that's more intense. And he would probably say this as well, that he needed to do that and to probably take care of himself more, but I don't know if he knew how, and I don't know if those avenues were available to him. So yes, I think I saw a little bit, but not much, and that was part of the struggle.
Yeah, obviously. And the second thing that he said, and I was already thinking about it a little bit before he actually said it on the movie, that it's like that the thing he says about comedians and humor and how they seem to be content with everything, but in reality, inside of them, there's turmoil and heavy sadness. And I kept thinking about this line, and also the fact that your movie, besides being so personal, also deals with the fragility of some men, and how we never actually talk about some people that struggle, but they have to keep a compact self in front of everyone and never deal with their emotions. This is how I felt. I mean, that's why I kept wanting to watch the movie, because I really felt for himself. You know, it was obvious that he was struggling. So, did he have any sort of, not cleansing experience, but did he maybe feel better? Maybe the filming and the movie itself, the creative part of it, maybe helped him deal with some things as a process, and yourself, obviously, as a filmmaker, his daughter.
Yeah, I think in the beginning of when I started filming, it was cathartic for him in some ways, just to literally get these things off of his chest, and to also share with me as a daughter what he had been going through personally. I think as the filming went on, and he realized that this was a real project and not that he realized it was something that I was really gonna make into something. then you know, of course, there was that element of, oh, okay, this is, you know, this, other people might see this, you know, and there was a little hesitation there, but I think, you know, he also wanted this to potentially help other people. And you mentioned that, you know, just kind of it resonating more with men, perhaps. That was always something that happening in the beginning, when I was doing some rough cuts of the film and show it to people that came from very different walks of life and had different opinions on faith and on religion, and maybe no experience with the church or any kind of church. I really noticed that it resonated with men specifically, and specifically with men who had some kind of authority, who were in some kind of position of authority. The pressure and the burdens and feeling like you have to really be a certain way for other people is something that was really relatable. And I remembered that my father told me that he had listened to, this was a long time ago, but he had listened to an interview with a psychologist about you know, how men and women typically process heavy things in their lives, and women typically, you know, they talk to a lot of people about things, and I'm speaking generally, of course.
Yes,
you know, they'll process things as they come. They'll talk to friends, they'll talk to other people, they'll talk to, you know, they process things more quickly. And men tend to bottle things, and they tend to bury things until it just kind of explodes out. And I remember he told me about listening to that interview and feeling like that described him completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some ways he had an experience that really mirrored that.
You've narrated his story in the movie in quite in a smart cinematic way, because the very beginning is quite disarming. It's a footage of him being in a car, and it's a bit like a dream. You don't know where this movie will go, and then of course you go into it, and we get to meet him and etc. So I want to know how much of a script did you have in your hands while you were shooting? Because I think it took you like 10 years, right, to shoot
almost that amount of time. Off and on, I was working on it throughout. Yeah.
So I was wondering how much of a script did you have, or did you figure this whole thing out while editing?
Most of it was made while editing. The film, I had so much footage. I had a lot of footage. I not only had his film, his film, by the way, is about 45 minutes long. And honestly, I could have put the whole thing in the film, because it's so good. Everything that he says and every moment is filled with some beautiful moments. But of course we didn't do that. But I had a lot of footage, and it was a challenge to find exactly what the angle of the story would be, because there were many different angles.
Mm-hmm.
At one point there was an angle where I was going to really focus more on the Greek American aspect and the aspect of my Yaya and Papu and how they came, and more of like an American dream kind of story. That the son became a priest and all of that. And there were a lot of different things that I considered for the arc of the whole story and of the characters. And because there was so much footage, typically in documentary, when you have that, it can be challenging to really focus on what the story is. And so it did really come together in the editing, I would say. I had different versions of scripts that I was working on as we were editing. And sometimes I was filming more. I was continuing to film even when we had started editing. Mm-hmm. So there were things that changed also when interviews progressed. But yeah, it's a big story in some ways. I mean, obviously it's a big story, but there were a lot of different angles, I think, that could have happened in the film. But I really wanted to focus on his journey, in the end, and his internal monologue and his more journey to finding some kind of resolution.
Maybe my next question is a bit too technical, but it was on my mind while I was watching the whole film. So maybe, I don't know if you want to answer, but his footage, did he do voiceovers, or was he speaking while he was shooting his stuff? Sorry?
He did voiceover.
Okay.
He did voiceover, and actually it's like kind of a funny process, I guess. He, this was in the late 80s. So he had like a huge VHS, where you took the VHS tape and you put it in, closed, pressed record. It was like this big. Right? So he filmed with that, and then he recorded the voiceover later. And you can actually, it's very low, but there's a small music on underneath his voiceover too. And so we couldn't separate that from the voice track. I don't know exactly what he did, but somehow it was married with the voiceover and then laid on top of the video. Yeah.
The reason I ask is because this is quite an evidence of how much he really cared about that thing that he was shooting. It's not just some confessions made in some lens. He actually worked his movie, And I was wondering also, was he okay with it being out in the world? Did you have to convince him?
No, I really didn't have to convince him, and I thought that I would have to, because there are a lot of things in there that obviously it's very vulnerable and revealing about someone's inner thoughts and inner life. But he really wanted me to see it. He really wanted me to have it. I think that he felt it really captured feelings he had been having and processing for decades. So it wasn't a challenge to really use that in the film. But I think, of course, when he created it, he didn't expect it to really be seen ever. My mother had seen it, but nobody, certainly in our family, had seen that before. But that's what I think is so great about it too, is that it's unfiltered because nobody was supposed to see it.
Yes.
You know, so sometimes, of course, when you're creating something and you know others will really watch it, there's another layer in the creation process. But he didn't have that, and so I think that is one of the reasons why it's so powerful, is because it's totally an inner, unfiltered monologue.
The relationship also between your parents is so genuine and so tender. I mean, even though they went through some stuff, it's obvious even at this very beautiful segment that you have at the storage space, how lovable they've been to each other. I mean, it was very touching also, this segment.
Yeah, it was that I have to say that was probably one of the hardest scenes in the film for me to do personally. That was one of the few times where I did feel as a director that maybe it was invasive, you know, because I knew that, again, kind of going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this process of like filmmaker and daughter and navigating all those things and those roles at the same time, I felt like that moment was something that two people were going through, and they, you know, even if they weren't my parents, it was still a very emotional moment. And I think you see that there's a moment where I walk off with my mother as she leaves, and then there's the moment where I'm alone with my father when he leaves. And I felt in the end it was important that I was there as a daughter. But I think some of the filming of that was very it was very raw, and that was, as I said, that was probably one of the more challenging scenes. You know, it's not like there's confrontational dialogue or there's so much, but it was a very emotional time for both of them.
And the last thing I'd like to say is that I found the title of the movie exceptional. It really it says everything about the picture. And well, I want to ask only if you'd like to share with us. Has someone from your family seen the picture, and how did they think about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the title was from my editor, Esther. We were talking about titles. I had other titles in the beginning. Again, when we were kind of figuring out what the angle of the film was going to be and the direction it was going to take, at one point I was really focused on that he was this man behind this camera and he was filming everything, and we were seeing things through his lens, and I had played with some titles that were focused on that. And then my editor was like, what about Sundays? You know, because the film opens with him driving to church on Sunday, and he talks about Sunday and what it means to him. And then that felt really right, that it would symbolize, you know, what the core in the beginning of that of the whole thing is. And so that's how we came to the title, and everybody loved it immediately. The team at Heretic in Athens, of course, like really loved it, and that's what we decided to do. And so, my father has seen the film. and he was he was joking about actually coming in person to Thessaloniki before the festival was canceled. He said, "Yeah, I'm going to sit in the back and I'm going to ask a bunch of annoying questions at the Q&A."
Yeah, it's too bad that you didn't have the opportunity to do this. And by the way, I have to ask also. You know, this is it's a happy circumstance that we were able, and everyone else that can have access to the festival can watch your movie. But also is unfortunate because, you know, it would have been completely different to watch Sundays on the big screen and also have you there and your father. And I wanted to know how this feels for you as a filmmaker who has your movie in a big festival such as the Thessaloniki Documentary Film Festival, and how do you experience the whole pandemic being in Los Angeles as well?
Yeah, well, yes, I of course was disappointed when the festival had to cancel. I think I was, obviously it was the right thing to do, and in a lot of ways Thessaloniki was one of the first festivals to have to deal with the situation.
Yes.
You know, because it was right after Berlin and everybody came back, and then all of a sudden that happened. And so I really feel for them, but I'm so happy that they were able to organize even this online edition. I think for me, I do hope that I can have a public screening in Greece at some point.
Yeah.
Because the Greek audience, having a dialogue with a Greek audience, to me, I'm very much looking forward to, because I'm so interested in how Greeks in Greece view the experience of Greek Americans, and how our relationship with the church is different than it is in Greece. And I'm very, very interested in getting feedback and just having a dialogue with an audience. So I do hope at some point, I don't of course know when or how, but I hope that can happen. That would be really great. And of course, yes, the experience of kind of being put into this situation now with the film, it was going to premiere at Thessaloniki, it was going to have the world premiere, and then hopefully go on to other festivals. And now so many other festivals are postponed or canceled, and you know, nobody really knows what's going to happen for this year. But I think that I've been listening to a lot of webinars and doing a lot of research on all of this, and I think that there may be new ways of distribution coming out of this, and new ways of connecting with audiences that come out of this. And I think that the model has the potential to grow and to evolve and change as a result of this. And I hope that it does, because I think that especially in the US, we are now getting many more international films. It wasn't like this 5 years ago or 10 years ago. I mean, with all the streamers and everything, it's much more of an international marketplace now, and Americans are watching things that, you know, they're watching things with subtitles, which, I mean, of course I was always watching many different things, but I think it's just a great thing to be able to consume, to see other perspectives from around the world. So I think that's hopefully a positive thing that will come out of this pandemic. But in terms of how I'm experiencing it personally, I'm in Los Angeles and inside,
yes,
as a lot of people are, and we're okay. Yeah, everything's okay, but it's changing a lot of things. And I think as so many people feel, it's very much making you rethink your work and your relationship to other people, and what's really important. And as a filmmaker, it's also been grounding in some way, and been making me want to create more. So that's been nice.
Well, I don't know if you'd like to add anything else.
You asked some amazing questions, Yanni, so thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind
fantastic questions. Yes, thank you. And I hope that people enjoy the film and are able to see it. I guess it's playing for about 6 more days on on Thessaloniki's site.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'd like to thank you for your time. And I encourage everyone watching this to find a way to watch Sundays. It's a beautiful and touching documentary. Thank you very much, Alethea.
Thank you so much. Bye.